Hi, welcome to Accelerated Engineering. This is the tutorial on the let function with a related bit of humor or laugh at the end. If you were looking for a tutorial on a different function, let me know in the comments and I will get started on it. So the let function is useful for refactoring equations that reuse multiple values or reuse a value multiple times, and for introducing some human readability to many of Excel's codes. Lots of Excel formulas or functions end up kind of looking like just a mess of gibberish, incomprehensible at times. And I have one that I've already tried to do this 3 times and not been able to kind of accurately regurgitate what it does the next time I go and look at it. So I'm going to refactor it into a let function. What I want this function to do is return the Sunday representing the week that contains this date. What that does for me is I can then add to it one at a time and generate the list of dates for an entire week. It helps me in this table where I'm pulling information from project numbers and days from a timesheet somewhere else, and it gives me this nice little summary of where I've spent time during the week on which projects for work. So the way that I've implemented this is through an XLOOKUP. I am looking for the number 1 always, because that is the number that Excel associates with Sunday. The lookup array for this is a list of weekdays, and I've sequenced them out starting at this date search date. What this portion of the function outputs is this column right here. See, I've just copied and pasted this chunk. The second part is the sequence of dates. And again, what this sequence function does is it gives me 7 values or 7 rows in one column, starting at this value here in B1 and stepping it by -1, which means that it decrements or it goes back in time. It's looking further and further back. And indeed, that's what this does. Here's the date that I originally said I was looking for. I want a week that contains this date starting on Sunday, and then decrements through. The other part of this function just looks at that same sequence and says, what weekday is this date, ranging from 1 through 7. The value that I want to return, of course, is this Sunday, February the 5th. In this particular case, February the 5th is indeed a Sunday. And that's why I'm using an XLOOKUP. For more information on the XLOOKUP function, check out my lookups tutorial. Now, the way that I would like to write this is as a let function, because I reuse this sequence and it's hard for me to remember what this function does. I'm going to do something like this. So it equals let. There we go. And I'll work in the function bar because it's just easier to work there. Close my parentheses. The first thing that I'm interested in is let's generate that, I'm going to call it an array of days. And the value that I'd like to assign it, I'll just assign it blank for the time being, because the value I would like to assign it is the same that generates this, a sequence of 7 starting at this date and then decrementing as it goes. I'll copy and paste that back into the function. And there we go, I've got that. The next thing that I want to do is generate an array of, I'm going to call it weekday numbers. Now, I could copy the formula that I've currently got in K1, this weekday sequence, but this function already uses this sequence. So instead of retyping it, I'm just going to say take the weekday of the array of days, and that's my array of weekday numbers. That's much easier. Now, I'm going to do that XLOOKUP. Same thing again. XLOOKUP, look up 1, look for it in the array of weekday numbers, and then return a value from that array of days. That's my entire XLOOKUP function. Now, I find this to be much more human readable. I think that I will name this variable output because I tend to do that. And then I will tell it to return the output. So hit enter and see what I get. Okay, if you're messing around with the dates and you get a number like this, don't panic. It's just Excel playing with the formatting. Change the date format to a short date, and that gives me the same number, which means that I've successfully refactored this equation. Now, the next time I look at this, I want to be able to tell what this does. So I'm going to add here a variable that does not get used inside of this function. I'm going to call it note1, and then say this function returns the first Sunday before the input, or before the targeted date. Returns the, I'm going to say even returns the date of the first Sunday before the targeted date, and close that off. So the next time that I go and look at this function, I'll be able to tell at a glance what it does. And this is just much easier to pick through. Even though it looks a little bit more janky, for lack of a better word, because it's done in definite steps, this is a much more human readable at a later date. I'm going to take all of this and punch it in here instead of the old function. Everything else responds as it's supposed to, and everything is just fine and dandy. I'm just going to pick a different date and make sure that my week changes. Yep, this contains that date. Let's try 01/18. That's not a real number. 01/18. Get a date. It's the Wednesday again. Let's just check and make sure that that actually is a Wednesday. 18th is a Wednesday. Yep, everything's looking good. It completely works. And then I'll just clean this up. Anyway, that concludes the tutorial on the let function. And if you're still here, you must now enjoy the joke. If I had a joke on the word let, I struggled with it for a little bit and then decided to let it go. And if that humor doesn't scare you off, consider subscribing for more content like this, and check out the XLOOKUP tutorial, which would explain a part of this as well.